What up, big dogs? I'm your host, Coach Craig, and this is Athletes Unleashed. On today's episode, my guest is a certified athletic trainer and sports medicine teacher. We discuss his discovery of athletic training and his path to working at the high school level, guiding student athletes through the difficult recovery process and returning to play, dealing with pushback from players, coaches, and parents, and the importance of building trust and rapport on and off the field. Please enjoy my conversation with Josh Masmela. Well, I mean, it's just interesting because you deal with student athletes nonstop.
Yeah.
That is, it was your job as the athletic trainer. Mm-hmm. Now the sports medicine, like tracked teacher.
Right.
I don't know what the program is specifically.
Pathway,
yeah, the sports medicine pathway. Mm-hmm. So the idea is you're training kids in school to follow the pathway to be able to eventually study it in college, become professional, either athletic trainers or work in the sports medicine community. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that's always existed.
Right.
When I played high school sports, there was no trainer.
Right.
And there was no one ever checking me for a concussion on the sideline.
Exactly.
You know. So, I mean, you played high school sports as well.
Yeah.
So, what were you? There was no trainer
No
at your high school.
No, not for me. So, so growing up, I started playing sports at 9 years old. Mm-hmm. It really wasn't until my stepdad kind of came into the picture, and he kind of just brought up the idea, like, "Hey, I see you enjoy playing sports. Let's try you out for football." Mm-hmm. And at first, my dad was actually a little hesitant. His thing was he didn't want to see me get hurt. And then me at 9 years old having a conversation with my dad, telling him I want to play, and I was in tears, saying I want to play. I understand I'll get hurt, but I'll be fine. And so that kind of just snowballed into everything. Played football growing up, then started doing rec leagues for basketball and baseball, and then going into high school, really concentrated on football, and then slowly realized volleyball was actually my sport. Yeah. So
had you ever played volleyball up into that point?
At the park with my dad. My dad was really into volleyball. So I kind of had that background experience with volleyball, just playing in the park with the family and all that. So freshman year, I actually didn't play volleyball. I did track during the spring season, and I had a really good friend who was really good at it. So lining up every race, knowing you're going to lose, that kind of played a mental toll on me. So finally, I'm going to go try for volleyball. Had a really great career in volleyball, all the accolades you could think of, all league, all city, all that. So that's kind of where my background in sports came to be. Obviously, injuries along the way. I actually have a scar on my arm from football. No athletic trainer on staff. So I kind of just went home, just bandaged it up, and then it kind of scarred really nasty. So it didn't heal properly. Knowing what I know now, I definitely should have had stitches. But springing into my first couple years of college, me being Filipino, by default, I'm supposed to be a nursing student, right? So at first I was going to go into the nursing route, went to Pasadena City College, was taking classes. And then me being just a sports junkie, watching sports, big Kobe fan. And there was 1 year Kobe had a finger injury, and the commentators, analysts were talking about how he had to get a special tape job for this playoff run they were about to do, and they kind of explained the taping technique that was going on, and then they mentioned Gary Vitti, and I was kind of thinking, wow, Gary Vitti, he's probably a sports med doctor. That'd be cool to kind of be involved with sports in that regard. Maybe not a nurse, but sports med doctor. So I do research, and his official title is actually athletic trainer. So I do more investigation on that career field. It was just a 4-year thing to become an athletic trainer.
Like in the college?
In the college, 4 years. So I'm like, this is a slam dunk. I want to do this. How cool would it be to be on a sideline on the bench of a professional team? So started looking into schools. I actually personally called program directors along California. I was only really able to talk to 2. Azusa Pacific was one of the few I talked to. Really had a great conversation with their program director, went up to apply, and there it was. So I ended up going into athletic training, became really passionate about the whole entire field, just because as an athletic trainer, you kind of get a genuine side of the athlete. They know they're not really talking to a coach they see every day, so there's not really going to be any judgment when they're saying stuff to me. Really inside joke is athletic trainers get all the tea from the athletes. And then it's true, athletes are really open to us, obviously depending on your rapport with them.
Sure.
So throughout athletic training school, you kind of find your niche. And it's kind of like, do you want to go work the professional sports, which obviously is the glamorous one of all. Collegiate level, D1, D2, NAIA, there's athletic trainers on all levels. But really, I kind of found my love for athletic training in the high school level. I always knew I wanted to be a family man as I got older. So I always had that in the back of my mind. How can I have a successful career in the field I wanted to do, but also be there for my family?
Sure.
Growing up with sports, my parents were always there for my games. And, that meant a lot to me. That means the world. Like, me being 33 years old now, looking back at it, like, my parents didn't give us a lot, didn't pay for my tuition or anything like that, but I would take them being at my games over anything else. That meant a lot.
Yeah, I think that support is extremely important, and it makes sense. I'm interested, like, the decision-making process of, like, I want to pursue this at a professional level, or I'm going to pursue it at a collegiate level, or it's the high school. Is it something that during your studies you're recognizing? Like, I don't know if there would be different classes if you want to be a professional athletic trainer, but is there certain pathways that are geared specifically to getting yourself to a place, or regardless of where you want to end up, you kind of have to start at the bottom, or it's all who you know? Like, I'm interested how you end up at a high school, but if you didn't want to, how do you find the college program? How do you get into the professional ranks?
Right. So when you're in an athletic training program, you do your clinical hours. So in the morning, early morning, you're doing your anatomies, therapeutic exercise, orthopedic classes with your professors. And you're typically done every day by 11:30, 12 o'clock. So at that point, your program will actually assign you a clinical rotation. And what they try to do is try to spread you out to where you're getting different experiences. So obviously, you have a rotation at your actual university. So Azusa Pacific was a D2 school. So I had a rotation with their football team when they had one at the time, and their volleyball team. Then I went to do a rotation with Mount Sac, their football team and track team. And then before all that, my very first rotations were at high schools, South Hills High School and Walnut High School. And there I met some great mentors who I still keep in touch till this day. That to me was the eye opener, like, because that was my first rotation. Like, I could see myself doing this. And while you're at your rotations, you're talking to your preceptors, those athletic trainers you're talking to, and they'll be very blunt and genuine with you. Like, high school athletic trainers, I could see my family. I don't work on weekends.
Yeah.
I have spring breaks. I have winter breaks. Summers off. So to me, that was like the big sell for me working for a high school. And then you kind of do your rotations at the university level, the JUCOs, and you kind of see those athletic trainers. Their schedules are a lot crazier because there's weekends. There's football games on Saturdays, and those are 16-hour days.
Yeah, and you're traveling all over the place. Same with the professional levels. Like, you're constantly traveling. You're with the team.
Right. And after college, I actually took an internship with Arena Football. So I did get my little taste of what it's like to be part of a professional organization. And yeah, those were long days.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with professional athletes, and their demeanor is a lot different.
Yeah, it's their job.
Compared to a high school athlete. And even JUCO, you really see that ambition in them. The professional sports kind of gave me a bitter taste a little bit, dealing with these professional athletes. They kind of were more stuck up in a sense. So dealing with those type of attitudes and behaviors, like, I didn't like it. Obviously, you deal with great athletes, even professional. I've met some great ones along the way.
Sure.
But yeah, having all facets of that experience for athletic training really made me taper my my choice to want to be a high school athletic trainer.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely understand that. I as a coach, I love working with kids, and you kind of find the age group that you resonate best with. And I can see, especially if you had really good experiences with working with the high school athletic trainers when you were in your learning process, it's a good opportunity to see the kind of impact that you can make. I would imagine when you're a trainer for a professional team or when you're a trainer for a college team, it is more like a business. You are preparing them to do their job, and so the relationship is a little bit more transactional. It's business-like.
Right.
But really at the high school level, and I find this with coaching as well, you're able to build relationships with kids, especially over years, and be a mentor for them and be somebody who they look back on in the same way that you do with your mentors. So I think I understand the sentiment to want to be here. It makes sense, schedule-wise, but also the relationships that you can build with students. They're in a really, they're in a time where you can really shape them for the better,
Right.
and give them opportunities to see whether or not this is a path they want to follow, and kind of instill your love for this
Right.
in them. And I think it's really cool that it even exists, because if this had existed when I was in school, I might have been interested in it.
Right.
Like the idea, we can kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the program, but you as the athletic trainer, before you were and you still do it now, even as the sports med instructor, as the teacher on campus, but we have an athletic trainer on campus, and they go to every sporting event for every team. They're there to deal with injuries and, do concussion protocol and all those things that we just didn't have when I was younger. Like you said, you just went home with a giant gash on your arm versus same thing. I had tons of injuries in games, and it was like, see how you feel tomorrow, and if it still hurts, go to the doctor.
Right.
So the reality of high school sports now is, I feel like the level is higher, the expectations are higher, but also the support is better.
Right.
And so you are able to make an impact, not just with the kids in your class or like sports med. At the high school, is it like a team? You guys compete, you work together. The kids have, schedules. They're on specific sports or specific games. They build relationships with the athletes, and a lot of them are athletes, and so they understand and respect what they're doing and like how important it is. I know for me as a coach, knowing that if a kid gets hurt on the field, that I don't have to make the evaluation, that there's a professional to do it, is a very comforting thing.
Right.
And to know that when you help a kid off the field and you leave them with the sports med group, that they're in good hands, and that you can go back to focusing on the game, knowing that, a lot of times, especially if a kid gets hurt, we'll stay with them, even while you guys are evaluating, just to make sure. But there are times when it's not an option, and knowing that not only the instructor but also the students are well-versed in taking care of the players is a really cool thing that it would have been super valuable to have when we played.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, the reality that it is a program, and it's a popular program at school too.
Right.
So I think it's very cool. Do you see, sports has always been something, especially in America, that has been huge. And it's growing. Is there an even bigger demand for athletic training now? Are you seeing that not only the interest in it is growing on campus, but the professional demand for it is increasing?
Yeah, 100%. So kind of just to give you a little bit of insight, California is the only state in America that does not require licensure for athletic trainers.
Really?
So basically what that means is you, who has never gone to school to be a certified athletic trainer, could watch some YouTube videos, how to tape an ankle and how to stretch arms and how to do like drills and stuff. And you could approach a high school and say, hey, my name's Craig. I have a degree in kinesiology, which is very general. It's not athletic training. Athletic training is a very specific degree.
Yeah.
So you could go to this high school, I have a kinesiology degree, and I would like to be an athletic trainer. Technically, that high school can hire you because there's not something to mandate this licensure and regulate it. So that has kind of been something where I always try to advocate for high schools, especially because not all high schools in California have an athletic trainer. And it breaks my heart every time I see visiting teams, they see our facilities, like, wow, this is really nice. We don't have this at school.
Yeah.
So we're very fortunate that William S. Hart School District kind of took initiative and is one of the bigger school districts that have athletic trainers at all of their high schools, and not just an athletic trainer, but a full-time athletic trainer. You see some high schools kind of cut corners a little bit. They'll have athletic trainers just for football season.
Right.
And they'll probably have them for just 2 or 3 hours throughout the week. And it's like, how much rehab treatment can these athletes get at that point?
Right.
Whereas here at our school district, these athletes could get treatment from 12 p.m. whenever our athletic trainer clocks in to 6 p.m. You know, that is free healthcare.
Right.
What a lot of parents and coaches don't understand. So it's one of the things where we're still trying as a field of athletic training to educate the general population as to what we do. There is a lot of confusion because they throw out the word trainer out there. Trainer can mean anything. A trainer could be someone, 24-hour fitness, LA
Sure.
Fitness. I hate it when kids call me trainer. I'm like, I'm not a trainer. I don't train Pokemon, you know? Like, it's just, you have to be specific. And when you watch professional sports, the commentators are really good at saying athletic trainer. So that kind of goes a long way. And, I do appreciate that. I'm sure on behalf of the entire athletic training field, we appreciate that the commentators take their time to say athletic trainer, really specify what profession they are talking about.
Yeah.
So the demand is there, and the biggest school district, LAUSD, they are now getting behind and having athletic trainers for their schools.
That's great.
And they have hundreds of high schools, so the fact that they're starting, that to me means a lot to me as another high school athletic trainer. So we're getting along here. It's going along in California, but to get that licensure in our state, that would be huge. So if you ever see athletic trainers advocating for when the time comes to vote on it, if you are a coach, student athlete, former student athlete, or a current athlete, and you had a great experience working with athletic trainers, so we would love your support when that time comes.
Yeah, as a coach and an athlete, it behooves you to do it. Like, for me, it only makes sense. And you made a good point there. It is really, I don't think when you go to a high school game, if there is an athletic trainer there, you see them on the sidelines, you have your team of students with you, and you're taping ankles and you're getting bags of ice and doing all that stuff. But what you don't see is all the kids who are in the athletic training facility before games, after games, during school. You can walk in, we're in the athletic training room right now.
Right.
You can walk in this room at any time once the trainer gets here. And the athletic trainer. Yep. Once the athletic trainer gets here, and you can see any number of kids from all different sports, in season, off season, all getting treatment, and even just hanging out in here because it's an environment that they like to be in, that they feel comfortable in. And it's just a really cool thing. And it's just, when I went to school, we didn't have it. So hearing that it's becoming embraced on a larger basis, and you're going to see it more often, and hopefully, licensure becomes a requirement,
Right.
Just for the safety of the kids.
Right.
I think that's important, but it is pretty amazing to me to see how much of an impact just a facility can make, or just availability to treatment, and how often you see athletes of all levels in here getting all sorts of treatment. I come in here any time of day, and there's students getting treatment. Before practice, before games, in the off season, rehabbing injuries, everything. And it's a fantastic resource for the kids.
Right.
And I think it's something. It kind of puts certain schools on the map, because it's like we're valuing the physical health of our athletes.
Right.
And that then takes me to another aspect of what you do, because we were you mentioned it before, and we talked about the relationships with your students and also the relationships you build with athletes. And obviously there's some crossover there. Some of the athletes are your actual sports med students.
Right.
And some of them are even part of the sports med pathway, where they are actually at games when they're in the off season of their sports.
Right.
They're supporting other teams and other, they're physically present. They're doing the work.
Right.
But we talked about building those relationships with the students. I want to talk about the trust that is built between the athletic trainers and students and student athletes, and also between the students participating in the pathway and student athletes.
Right.
But also I want to talk about the, like, you know how to treat the physical aspects.
Right.
But there's so much of like the mental and emotional side that goes into not only preparing your body to perform and preparing your mind to perform, but recovery from injuries, rehab, all of those things. You are trained to do the medical aspect of it.
Right.
Is there mental and emotional aspects of training that are involved in doing that, and how prevalent is that for you as someone who was the athletic trainer, is now the sports medicine pathway instructor?
Right.
How much of a focus do you have on that? Because I know in talking with other athletic trainers, one thing they have expressed to me is I can treat them for their injury, but when they walk out the door, I can help them physically, but the mental and emotional aspect I'm not always able to contribute with.
Right. Yeah, so that's a great point. You know, as athletic trainer, we are seeing these athletes on a student basis. We can deal with their objective, injuries, the torn ACLs, the sprained ankles, and stuff like that. But as you're doing these treatments, from the very second this athlete goes down on the field, you're initiating a potential new rapport or relationship with the student athlete.
Yeah.
As an athletic trainer at high school, you don't know all your athletes. You have an idea of who they are, but you don't know everyone by their name.
Right.
And if you don't know this athlete by a first name basis, that might be a good thing because that just means they've never gotten hurt.
Sure.
But let's just say someone goes down, sprained ankle, you evaluate them, and things go well to where there's no fracture, right? That's the first thing as athletic trainers do. We need to see what the severity of the injury and rule out the potential threats that could make it a threat, a pretty bad injury. So once that happens, depending how your demeanor is as an athletic trainer, if you're an inviting individual, that's where it goes to where is this student athlete going to put in the work to come in every day for treatment?
Right.
I can't force an athlete to come in for treatment. Obviously, you could communicate with the coaches like, hey, so-and-so has not been coming in for treatment. Coaches get mad. Now they're starting to come, right? But when they're in for treatment, they're not just like, you don't point to them like, oh, that's my sprained ankle, that's my torn ACL.
Sure.
You identify as your student athletes as an individual. Like, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so. They have this injury, right? And so as good athletic trainers, what they do, they display that they care, right? And that could go different ways. Some people are very stoic with the face, so they're not really expressive. So there's different ways to show you care for an athlete. But just being there, talking to them as you're doing treatment stretches, and just building that rapport, like, how was your day? Like, how's it feeling? How was class today? Like, who are your favorite teachers and stuff like that? So that goes a long way. I think some people fail to realize a lot of these athletes, student athletes, they might go home and we don't know what their house situation is like. Maybe mom and dad are working late, and they have no one to go back home and say, Mom, Dad, I did this at school today, So you, as the athletic trainer, you're potentially that person for them, someone that they look to on a daily basis because they're going to see you every day for treatment. And so building that rapport, then you're building that trust, and then that kind of spreads like wildfire. Once an athlete says, dude, like, our athletic trainer Josh, our athletic trainer John, they did such a great job.
Yeah.
And, they see the athletes like, hey, I have something going on, but you should go see Josh or John. And so that kind of just goes a long way with just building that rapport. Like, it starts off with that one individual. And then just understanding what you are doing as an athletic trainer. And then just not be so reliant on things that in the athletic training field we don't like to rely too much on, whether it's like modalities, like electric stim, ice, like that's all cool, but these kids might have access to that at home.
Yeah.
So what makes you so important to this athlete's recovery process? It's your knowledge, the manual therapies, the sequence in which athletes should do things, and educating them. That's the biggest thing. I think you mentioned already to the audience here that I am now the sports medicine teacher. And that was an easy transaction because every day as an athletic trainer, you are educating your athletes on how to take care of their bodies, what is happening to the body with a certain injury.
Yeah.
So just seeing them every day, that is what's building that rapport. And obviously, you talked about, so how do we deal with anything that might come up, when someone is showing signs of that they are dealing with something mentally. And it's just, sometimes it's just about being present and listening.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't even have to be like I have to give advice. Like, sometimes they have no one they feel comfortable sharing this with. An athlete might come in and injury, and they want to play. They're pressured to play.
Yeah.
But deep down, they're scared. Like, they don't want to go play. But coaches, their teammates, their parents, you need to play.
Yeah.
When you come into an athletic training room, you build that rapport, they'll tell you, looking in the eye, like, I don't want to play.
Yeah.
And as an athletic trainer, you have that, I hate to say the word power, but you have that impact on an influence on coaching staff, on admin, like, hey, so-and-so, I don't think they're ready to play.
Yeah.
And again, that's building rapport. Do you have a good rapport with the coach? I know a handful of coaches. If I said something, they would trust me, because I've been here for 8-9 years.
Do it myself,
right?
100%.
So if it all starts about building that rapport, that's huge right off the bat. So to be successful, you have to build these great rapports, and it'll all just kind of trickle down in a positive way. So but dealing with athletes from a mental perspective, the thing that goes a long way in my experience is it's just being present.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
No, I agree with you. I think I deal with similar things as a coach, where you see the kids all the time, especially when they're coming in for recovery or rehab. You can kind of tell when things are off, and sometimes they're just looking for someone to vent to, or, for me, in addition to coaching soccer and a number of other things, I'm also a health and wellness coach, and the big thing about it is understanding your scope of practice and when things are outside of your scope of practice. And so I feel the same way, where it's about building trust and building a relationship, where that if you said to them, hey, I think it's time for you to go speak to somebody else, I'd like you to see this person, coming from somebody that they trust and someone who's actively trying to help them get back to where they want to be, it's a little bit more palatable. I know as an athlete, if somebody had told me, especially being younger, if someone was like, I think you need to go speak with a mental health professional, I would have immediately pushed back on it. I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in that. I'm fine. But hearing it from somebody that I deeply trust, who I know is there to take care of me and to help me achieve what I want to achieve, I think it's a lot easier to manage that process. You mentioned something talking about athletes who are scared to get back on the field. I understand that, and I understand feeling pressure to go out and perform and wanting to make sure that you are 100%. I know, especially when it's coming back from like torn ligaments or broken bones or whatever it might be, some more substantial injuries, there's always concern that you're not going to be the same or it's going to get worse. I'm actually wondering about the inverse of it, because I feel like this is what I see a lot more often as a coach, is players who are not ready to come back, but are eager to. And you said it too, like there's a level of trust between coaches and athletic trainers, and I will tell any kid that has any sort of issue, the first thing they need to do is go see you or John, our athletic trainer. That's, if they haven't seen you, I don't want to talk to them about it. You know what I mean? Like, I would like you to go get an evaluation. That's always my question. What did Josh say? What did John say? Like, oh, they said this. Okay, well, now we can move forward. But in my experience as a coach, I see a lot more often kids not being ready to go back. Physically, obviously, mentally, emotionally, they want to play. They desire to play. And especially for high school sports, seasons are not super long. So the opportunities to play are limited. When you have a league season that's only a couple games, football, you play just a handful of weeks. And, even soccer where I coach, you're only playing 12 league games. So if you're going to miss a substantial amount of time, you're missing out on a season. A softball player we had on the podcast previously broke her thumb, and now she's out for her senior year. It's a devastating thing to have to deal with, but I know from personal experience where I've talked to athletes where I'm like, I appreciate that you want to play. I know you think you can make an impact, but you are not physically prepared to do so. So how often are you dealing with kids who are super eager to get back on the field, and you have to kind of temper those expectations and be like, you're not ready, I'm going to talk to your coach and make sure they don't play you.
Right.
Versus, obviously, if a kid feels pressured to play, that's one thing, but do you feel pressured by the student athletes or by the coaches to make a decision to say they're good to go when, I'm sure you don't against your better judgment, but I'm sure those things have arisen in the past where kids are pushing to play and you're like, you're not ready.
Right. Yeah, and that's a great question because as athletic trainers, we're under a constant pressure coming from the players, coaches, and parents, especially at the high school level. It really is on a case-to-case basis. Sprained ankle, for example, one of the common injuries that you'll probably deal with. If the student athlete's putting in the time, and a good athletic trainer will put them in situations where they're doing the workouts, rehab, and drills in the athletic training room, and good athletic trainers will kind of show them in that regard. Like, oh yeah, I feel like playing this week. Okay, yeah, let's see what our treatment's like. But you have this in the back of their mind. Maybe it's a basketball player and they haven't gone for a layup at all for a week because it happened last week. So you start ramping up the rehab. Now there's a certain drill they have to hop. That hurts. I'm like, so if you're just doing a simple hop, you're gonna go for a layup in traffic. What's gonna happen? And you'll most likely see the click happen in the head. Like, you're right. And then you just as an athletic trainer, you have to say like, we're happy you're eager to get back, but let's be smart about this. Sometimes we have to look at the schedule. Maybe we're at the beginning of their schedule. Like, hey, like, why risk it if you have in the basketball season, you maybe have 10 more games, So let's just play it smart. But I understand you talked about like football. There's a handful of games. I understand that. I had a situation before Hart. I was at a different high school, and senior year. It was an athlete's senior year, got a concussion, okay? And before every season, every athlete within the high impact sports, I usually try to have some type of lecture with them about concussion specifically.
That's fine.
So I tell them, like, what are the dangers of playing with a concussion? Because half the battle is having the student athlete report it to me.
Yeah.
And if they don't report to me, I can't read your mind. I don't know.
Sure.
And then I go on to explain what happens if you do play with a concussion. So this certain athlete got a concussion, clear as day. He was knocked out, couldn't quite register what was going on, did the evaluation. And I broke to him, like, I as much as I would love to see you finish out your high school career, I can't put you back out there. Tears going down his face. I get a little choked up at this, right then and there, because this is my first job out of high school. And so for me to kind of break that news to them, that's probably one of the hardest jobs in athletic training, giving the bad news to these young student athletes.
So I was going to ask you, that's my next question is, when you have to diagnose them on the sideline, or when you have to tell them you're out of the game, or like, it must be the most difficult part. You're telling a kid, hey, especially for me with soccer, you see a lot of torn ACLs, especially with girls.
Right.
And I've seen it multiple times on the field, and I would hate to be the person who's doing the test. It's always nice to see the athletic trainer do the test and be like, I don't think it's torn.
Right.
I think you're okay.
Right.
And see the wave of relief come over the kid's face. But it's the antithesis of that, where you tell them, you're done for a while.
Right.
It's got to wave really heavily on you.
Right. So a strategy that I do, there's been a handful of times I'll test an ACL on the sideline, and in my head I know it's torn, but I'm not going to break the news to them right then and there.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put it down lightly, like, hey, so testing out your knee, and kind of show them there's swelling in it already. I do feel some looseness to it, but I don't have x-ray vision. We won't know until we get an MRI. So let's try to set you up with a doctor's appointment, get the MRI, and we'll know for sure.
Yeah.
If it is not, I'll do everything I can as your athletic trainer to make sure you can play this season.
Yeah.
Okay? If it goes south, I'm still here for you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't. those conversations. I mean, it's difficult enough. You said it before, where you were trying to be. We can teach them to be a little bit smarter about things. You know, I've had those conversations with athletes before. Where they're like, "I'm ready to play this week," and I'm like, "I understand, but even if you're 50%, 70%, 80%, and you get hurt again, now you're out for even longer. It's usually a sprained ankle or something along those lines, where it could be an injury that is going to resurface over and over again, something that you need to give time to heal."
Right.
And having those conversations with athletes where it's like, let's look at the schedule, let's do these things, and let's see how we can approach this to be as effective as possible. And then it's coordinating with you guys as well.
Right.
Trying to confirm, like, what's the time frame on this? When are they going to be able to be, you know, how risky is the re-injury rate? Those kind of things. And, you know, when you're younger, you got that kind of one-track mind. You're like, no, I'm going to be fine.
Right.
But they're not thinking about, well, if the re-injury, the assumption is I'm not going to be injured.
Right.
You know, but when you play sports, it's an inevitability at some point. And then when you have something much bigger, obviously I like your approach, where it's like, I can't tell you for sure whether or not, and it's got to be. It's probably for the best that you don't have that ability and that you aren't the one to deliver that news.
Right.
But it's got to weigh very heavy on you when you're doing a test and you're like, this is bad. And I'm sure you have to, like, keep your face from showing.
Right.
And, you know, do you find when you're doing those things, like the students that you're with, like the ones who are in the sports med pathway, who are helping you, is that part of something you guys talk about, where it's like, hey, you're dealing with people who are like, this is their dream, this is what they love to do, and there's potential that they might not ever do it again, so you have to be very professional. And you know, I think a lot of them would understand because they're also athletes.
Right.
But that to me has just got to be, it's a scary enough position as a coach, but knowing when you're going through the test, like, and they're hearing what you're saying, your students are hearing what you're saying, they know what you're saying.
Right.
It's got to be a difficult kind of balance act to play with everybody there.
Yeah, because obviously, me being the sports medicine teacher, we have a sports medicine pathway, so we do have sports med interns on the sidelines. And first and foremost, my first rule with the internship is just act professional. If you act professional, all rules will follow after. So that's our one rule in Heart Sports Med. So yeah, obviously, doing the assessment, they understand they're there just to observe. Really, the sports med students are there for, like, first aid, hydration if the athletes need it. Not too much, right? We don't want to put them under that pressure. Don't want to give that responsibility. But yeah, from a education standpoint, you know, you obviously want them to see things firsthand, but it's like a double-edged sword. I don't want my athletes getting hurt. Yeah. So it's tough to keep the program interesting if they're not seeing anything.
That's very interesting.
So, but when they do, you know, they learn this stuff in class. So they'll see myself or John do the assessment. The good students already see what we're seeing. Yeah. But they're not gonna say it out loud.
No.
You know, behind closed doors when the athlete's gone, then we could discuss.
Sure.
Right. But we're
it's
never
a learning opportunity.
Yeah. But we're never going to discuss in front of the athlete when it's an acute injury. So when it happens right then and there. But let's just say the athlete with a torn ACL comes back a week later. It's confirmed torn ACL. All the tears have been shed. You could ask the athlete, hey, do you mind if I perform the testing in front of my students so we could see what a positive test looks like? And most of the time, because you've built that rapport with the entire athletics program, they'll be open to it.
That's cool.
So yeah, it's just kind of read the room type of thing.
Yeah. It seems like, I mean, I feel like coaching and athletic training and teaching, they all kind of, you're developing people.
Right.
But in the athletic forum, like, the injury is the one devastating, like, stopping point. But I feel like, you know, I think there are people that go through and don't get injured, but I feel like for the most part, like, it's all a learning process for the athlete, for the interns,
right.
And for us as well, like, understanding how certain kids handle certain news or their approach to things. I know for me, like, being injured, doing physical therapy, when I'm in the room with the physio, I have no problem doing it. It's when I'm supposed to be at home doing it that I struggle.
Right.
So
do you ever have like, I mean, the level of trust you have on campus is very high when it comes to athletes. I know that this program and you specifically carry a lot of weight with a lot of athletes, and if you say something to them, they will listen for the most part. Do you ever get like a lot of pushback or resistance from certain athletes where they're like, well, I don't resonate, like your timeline isn't right, or I'm going to prove you wrong, or those kind of things? I just know there are a lot of stubborn athletes out there, and so it must be something that you run into.
Yeah, 100%. But truth be told, like you said, I've kind of had a lot of years at this school, so the athletes, I honestly don't have too much trouble with. It's coaches and parents. You'd be surprised. So there's even coaches on campus who don't necessarily buy in fully with sports medicine. And, it does break my heart and John's heart a little bit. But that's just kind of the difficulties. It's not just here at Hart. It happens across, whether it's a high school level, JUCO level, university, D1, and even professional level. Like there's just some coaches who don't understand how to buy into something, and they don't really stop to think that this is a great resource for our student athletes. And I think a lot of it comes down to some coaches are very particular in how they train their athletes. And maybe they think if they go to an athletic trainer, that training, we're going to alter that. But what I want coaches to understand, we're never here to coach them, right? So to kind of put it into perspective here, like if me being an athletic trainer, it's obviously gonna irk me a little bit if a coach steps on my territory. Like if I hear you saying, oh, you should stretch out this way, roll out this way. But what if I took your goalkeeper and said, hey, you ever try to like catch the ball this way? It's not a very direct instruction. It's very indirect, inorganic, but like, like how does that make you feel if I were to do that? Like, with no background.
Of course.
Right? So I just don't know how to get coaches to understand that. Like we're here to help, and you talked about it earlier, how like a sigh of relief is having an athletic trainer on staff. Like you don't have to deal with it. And we're just this giant safety net for coaches, because if a coach does not send their athlete to the athletic trainer, that injury gets worse and things turn south for some strange reason. Us athletic trainers can't help you. We don't have it documented that this athlete ever walked in. We cannot read the minds of all our student athletes. So that's definitely the biggest difficulty. I've had difficult parents who don't necessarily see eye to eye with the online or the on-field evaluations, especially with concussions. The concussions is the big one. There's like this magical number that gets sent out. 7 days, you're fine. But I have to educate the parents, like not everyone heals the same. Not every concussion is the same. Much like how a sprained ankle, a torn ACL is not the same. So it could take weeks for one concussion to fully heal, because maybe they didn't report an original one they had. So maybe they're stacking two concussions on top of each other. So again, it's just what your demeanor is as an athletic trainer, as a professional. That goes a long way. How you carry yourself, how you talk to people, how you talk to parents, coaches, that goes a long way. So if you are someone who doesn't really have that communication skill, it's going to be really hard for a stranger like a parent to trust you. And if you're not really making an effort to build that rapport with coaches, that's also not going to work in your favor as well.
I mean, it's not surprising to me, I guess, but it is takes me back a little bit, because for me as a coach, I find you and the athletic training program to be an immensely important resource. It adds like not only like validity, but a safety net, but it's checks and balances, man. Like it's so important when you're dealing with athletes who are still developing, student athletes their bodies are still developing, their brains are still developing. It's important to understand, like, yes, sports are important, but myself, and I think most coaches, hopefully, are in it to, especially at the high school level, to develop people, not just players, and looking out for what's in their best interest. Obviously, you want them to play. You want them to do well for the school.
Right.
I want my athletes to perform and to be able to play. But the thought of like getting resistance from coaches, like I want my athletes to be able at their peak. If they're not healthy, they're probably not going to be able to perform the way they need to. And especially for someone who does a lot of health and wellness, when they're not able to perform at the top of their ability, it really starts to affect them in different areas. So if kids are being pushed to play when they're injured, and not only are they physically in pain, but maybe they're not performing as well, or they're not getting the results they're looking for, it starts to affect them in different aspects as well. It's just, that's very concerning for myself as a coach to know that not everybody resonates with what you're doing. Right. I think it's extremely important, and I'm glad. I think it's probably a carryover of not having it when they were younger.
100%.
It's like, I didn't need it. You know, it's not a big deal. And it's one of those, it's rub some dirt on it kind of mindset.
100%.
But the reality is, you look at all the people who used to play sports, their bodies are all broken. So, we don't know the depth of the cognition problems that they have. I don't know what my cognitive function is going to look like down the road. I know for a fact I had concussions as a kid. I can think about 2 of them. And in both of those situations, I definitely didn't come off the field.
Yeah.
I continued to play. And those are the ones that I like specifically remember.
Right.
So I understand the athlete's desire and the family desire and the coach's desire to make sure that they can continue to play.
Right.
Because when I was younger, you did.
Right.
You just dusted yourself off and you got up and kept playing.
Right.
And I can remember getting a concussion and still being able to perform at the peak of my ability. It didn't affect me in the moment.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I wasn't severely affected over time. I have no recollection of what happened after that, and probably for a good reason.
Right.
But it's concerning to me that there is still pushback. I understand wanting your best player. If your best player gets a concussion and now they have to sit out for multiple games, I get it.
Right.
But what are we really here to do?
Exactly.
Are we here to win games, or are we here to make sure that these kids have a good experience and develop and are better when they leave us than when we got them?
Exactly.
And that's concerning to me, because truly what you guys do it's a necessity, in my opinion. And I'm hoping, I think I see it now too with kids, they're more aware of injuries, not just getting injuries, but like what's severe and what's not, how to treat them. I do see a lot of kids push through a lot of things, and rightfully so. Like, there is a certain aspect of playing through the pain, but especially with head injuries now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just the awareness of it,
Right.
and understanding, hey, there is a limit to how many of these things you can have,
Right.
and so you need to make sure that you're taking care of it.
Right.
And the other thing is, when you follow the protocols, if you do it to the letter and you're focused on getting better right away and reporting it right away, you start the process right away.
Right.
You can get those things back on track. You can start the process to play again immediately. It's when
Right.
you don't report it, and a couple days later, you're like, oh, I can't concentrate in class, or I have this blinding headache, or I can't, I'm light sensitive, or whatever, to concussions specifically. But I think it works for other physical injuries as well. If you don't get it checked out right away, if you're not listening to the advice of the professional who's telling you, this is not right, you need to go, and that's always the thing too, is you guys just refer them to go see a doctor.
Right.
And if you follow that process and you are legitimately injured, you either you get back on track faster, you start the process to come back as opposed to delaying it, or you find out that you're okay and you get back to it right away.
Right.
So it's just, it is a little surprising to me to know that you get as much resistance as you do, because, and maybe I'm a little bit younger than some of the other coaches you're dealing with,
Right.
but for me, I see it as an essential service. Like, having you guys on the sideline is, it's kind of, it's a safety blanket,
Right.
Truly. Like, knowing that you're there, that obviously, ideally, you won't have to touch the field.
100%. Yeah.
And most of the time when you do, it's just, hey, we're making sure they're okay, you're patching somebody up, or whatever it might be. But having you there it's a confidence thing. And I think it's confidence for the kids too, knowing that if anything happens, you're going to be taken care of.
Yeah. And it's just like, I mentioned that there's some pushback with some coaches. It's not a lot. It really is not. I think over the years, coaches have really bought into what we're doing here on our campus. So it's not a lot. I don't want to go and say like our campus is getting a lot of pushback. It's not a lot.
But still, any is still...
Any is a lot, though. Yeah, I will go in and say that. Even just one coach pushing back, because you don't know what this coach is saying to, 25, 30 athletes.
You're only dealing with the 1 or 2 kids who are injured.
Yeah, and it just doesn't sit well with us athletic trainers when coaches are saying, don't go see them, because you're making us look bad when all we're trying to do is keep them in play.
Right.
But we can't do that if we don't know. And
Right.
we can't do that if a coach, parent doesn't allow us to do what we want to do, and that is returning them to play as quick and as fast as possible.
Yeah. I know for me, like, it's very important you guys are there. I think like you said, for the vast majority of people, parents, coaches, like, it is a benefit having you there. And I think it shows when you go to other places and they don't have an athletic trainer. When we're in playoffs, you guys travel with us, which is, I mean, you're part of the team.
Right.
It really, that's the relationship level that it builds. And the reality is when you get to the higher levels, your athletic trainer is part of the team.
Exactly.
They're, professional levels, they're employed by the team.
They're there, yeah.
So instituting that at a younger age and creating the expectation that it's going to be there. I feel like there's probably a lot of students that go look at colleges and be like, well, what do you mean I'm an athletic trainer? Like, or they're not at the game, or whatever it might be. So it makes me happy as a coach to know, like, I go to tournaments for soccer and they have the med tent with athletic trainers on site. When I played in tournaments when I was younger, that was non-existent.
Right.
But it's like a requirement now. The expectation is we have to make sure the kids are being taken care of, and the realities of how much they're playing now. Every sport now is like a year-round thing, at least in the U.S.
Right.
Basketball, baseball, soccer, like, it's all year-round all the time.
Right.
So that's one other thing that I am kind of interested in is the types of injuries that you see, and maybe like what, from your professional opinion, would be the best way for student athletes to prevent those things. So like in my mind, I'm thinking of the recurring issues that happen all the time, or the types of injuries you're seeing now in younger people where it's like they have back problems, or I had knee issues when I was a kid, just from repetitive use, and especially with the specializing of sports at much younger ages, you're seeing the breakdown of bodies in very specific ways because you're using the same muscles and same ligaments and joints over and over and over again. So what are the like most alarming or most common types of injuries? I know we said sprained ankles and those kind of things, but for younger and younger players, what are the things that people should be watching out for? I'm sure it varies sport to sport.
Right.
And then do you have any suggestions for like the best way to try and avoid those things, to maybe preemptively try and prevent a lot of injuries?
Yeah, so like you said, injuries vary from sport to sport. But the one misconception I do kind of want to put out there, the whole concept of RICE. Have you ever heard of RICE?
Sure.
So RICE is rest, ice, compression, and elevate. It's a very old school approach. I would say our new viewers, our athletic training viewers, hopefully agree with me. It's a very old school theory. It's something that we shouldn't practice nowadays. It's been proven the benefits of movement. Movement is the best benefit to a rehab process.
In health and wellness coaching, we say movement is medicine.
There you go, and it's true. Like, why are we going to keep someone who has an ankle sprain, don't let them do anything for a whole week, or just ricing it, and then that's a whole week, soccer game, that's two games in a week, and then now we expect an athlete to go back and play after resting for a week.
Right.
They've lost their strength. They haven't done really anything to decrease swelling. Now muscles are tense. There is a tight restraint. There's tightness within those muscles. So you're doing yourself a disservice if you're actually just resting, icing, and all that.
Yeah.
Movement is medicine. So if you don't have access to an athletic trainer, go see a physical therapist, go see some chiropractors, and hopefully they could show you some stretches, some rehab things that you could do from the moment the injury happens. You could do some rehab the day after an acute ankle sprain. It could be something what's called like isometrics, where you're contracting the muscle, but you're not creating movement, because sometimes the movement's causing pain. So maybe if you're creating some strengthening programs where you're in an isometric position, that's going a long way. That's gonna bring you back sooner rather than later. So not to like drown the audience with like crazy concepts of sports medicine, but that's like a big thing. One thing, I'm probably gonna open a can of worms with this, but I tell my sports med class, like, what does ice really do for you?
So I've heard this before.
Yeah. So what does it do? Like, does it actually, is it proven to speed up the healing process? And they're like, yeah, why not? And I tell them, if you could find a published article, I have to tell them a published article that says ice speeds up and has benefits of speeding up an injury, I will give you an A in the class. And I say this confidently because there is not one.
Right.
Sure, there'll be those students who bring up like a Facebook article or a Yahoo article, but there's just nothing really there, and we can't, as healthcare professionals and researchers, we can't really measure what the ice is doing, right? If we're putting ice on our skin's relatively thick. So for the thought that ice is gonna have the effect on a more deeper level in our body, that's a lot to ask for. And I go back and say, like, ice, when you use ice, you feel better, right? So that's why you think it's helping you.
Sure. But
you're feeling better because why? You're not feeling it.
Yeah.
It's numbing it. So that numbing aspect kind of gives student athletes a false sense of security, I would probably say. That'd be a good way to put it. So that's just another thing. I'm never going to refuse ice to someone. Like if an athlete's rolled their ankle, can I have ice? I'm like, oh, no, you're going to slow down the healing process. I'm never going to do that.
Yeah.
Kind of tell you, if we want to help with a thing, yeah, let's give you some ice. Because that goes a long way. If you're not in pain, you're more comfortable. So obviously, I still use ice in my practice.
Yeah.
But really what I'm trying to say is let's not be so reliant on like the old school approaches of just resting and icing.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Yeah, man. I don't remember like where I saw it, but it was someone making the argument that icing doesn't really do anything. And I remember telling my wife, who was a Division I athlete, and she was like, could not believe, like, that's ridiculous. But like you said, there is no published confirmation of what it's actually doing, and yet it still gets used.
Right.
I'm sure whatever benefits it has, even if it's just a placebo effect, are useful enough, and the expectation is that you have it. But even for me, a kid gets hurt, I tell him, go home and ice it. It's just,
Right.
I think it's just kind of a default. It's the easiest thing. And
It is.
It's just kind of what we've always done. So I'm interested to see how the athletic training and the environment or the community continues to evolve, and the practices continue to evolve. Because obviously at the highest level, I'm sure they're doing all sorts of stuff. And now with the advent of social media, you're starting to see how people are training at the higher levels. Like soccer player, we talk about the fascia and the foot all the time, and how important it is to like work on those things for fast switch movement and all that stuff. So I'm sure I know it varies from sport to sport,
Right.
and soccer is what I'm most well versed in. But it's interesting to see how quickly it's evolving, and the more information that we have, and now with the ability to track athletes throughout games and those kind of things, the more data that is being collected, I feel like the more confidently you can start to make decisions, and the type of information continues to expand. So for someone like you, who is the sports medicine teacher, do you see your class continuing to evolve at like a rapid pace? Like what you're teaching now, do you imagine that in 5 years it's going to be substantially different?
Well, not substantially different. Obviously, the field of medicine is growing. There are definitely some more updated concepts, depending on techniques that we're using, whatever unit we're learning. But not substantially, not too fast. But there are, I'm trying to think of one at the top of my head, like what are some new concepts that we learn? I mean, there might be like new orthopedic tests that come out. There's definitely more research on like for injury prevention for ACLs. So stuff like that, but we're not going to get a drastic change like overnight.
Yeah, I mean, you see it on the professional ranks of how quickly certain people are coming. It's like, oh, this guy came back from a torn ACL or a torn Achilles in record time.
Right.
So clearly things are starting to evolve and change.
Right.
I'm excited for you guys to see how it continues to, how the techniques and if something that is as universal as put some ice on it eventually evolves into something completely different.
Right.
That is more useful, more effective. So is there anything for student athletes? Is there some general things or some suggestions that you have to try and minimize potential injury or to best prepare themselves that they can do on a regular basis? Just some advice that you might have. What are some things that you would recommend your run-of-the-mill high school athlete should do or should be focused on to make sure that they are minimizing risk and potentially maximizing performance? I know it's a tall ask.
No,
but
100. Yeah, it's a good question. Definitely take warm-up seriously. This could even go on more of the coach's lap. Develop a great warm-up regimen. That goes a long way. Do it every day, and I see athletes all the time in their warm-up lines. They're not taking it too seriously, but I would say that take the warm-up seriously.
Dynamic over static stretching.
Exactly, and then even post practice, post game, take the time to do some static stretching. They say does help after the fact, right? So doing some type of warm up or cool down, that can go a long way. And another thing too, like I know coming from a club coach, I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but play multiple sports. In all honesty, it's because, and I'm not saying that just to say it, but it's a proven, it's research that athletes who play multiple sports, they have less chances of injury.
Sure.
And we talked about how because we're overworking our muscles, and that's true because let's just say you have a basketball player, for example. You have a basketball player. This is multi-plane athletes, right? They're going diagonally, straight and back, front and forward. And then let's just say now they go to something like track, right? Track is really more saddle, straightforward. So you're not going to get that burnout and that overworking of the same muscles.
Right.
And you're still keeping yourself physically fit.
Yeah.
And then I think even from a mental perspective, like a change of scenery after 3-4 months in one sport, that could probably benefit as well.
New environment.
Right.
New challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I grew up playing multiple sports. I think it's become less common these days because kids are specializing so early, and it's just the nature of sports in America.
Yeah.
I know I talk to coaches all the time about the Scandinavian model, where they don't really have they don't have any competition, like structured competition until they're like 14 years old. They make them try all sorts of different sports, and they're building more of a total athlete. So the value in learning different types of movement and developing your body in different ways versus just repetitive, I agree with you. I think for club coaches, I think they would maybe not want players because they want them with their teams or whatever. And like I said, they're playing year round all the time.
Yeah.
But for me, anytime I look at someone who plays a multitude of sports, I just know that player is going to be a better athlete,
100%.
Just all around athlete. And there could be some drop off in skill level between someone who's playing a multitude of sports and someone who's concentrated on one because they're putting in all that work for that same thing all the time. But personally, I feel like if you drop a really well-rounded athlete just into a sport that they play, semi-regularly, they will be able to develop more quickly. They can learn those techniques faster just because they're more athletically adept.
Right.
So, well, I appreciate that. It's good advice. I always like to wrap up every episode by asking my guests for one piece of advice. You just gave a couple of them.
Right.
Is there anything else that you'd like to give the student athletes or prospective athletic trainers or really anybody, just something from your experience, from your from your professional career?
Yeah, I mean, just don't be scared to reach out. Speak your mind. If something's bothering you, let someone know. You know, that's going to eat you up inside. So that's my biggest thing. Just know you're not alone. That's the biggest thing. Like it could be like, man, maybe mom, dad not home, my brother, sister not home, but man, you might have someone on campus who really cares about you. It could be your campus supervisor, could be your teacher, could be your athletic trainer. You know, just know that there's someone who is willing to sit down and listen to what you have to say, and they won't judge you for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people or student athletes nowadays are scared of, what judgment might come out of what they say. And I think as everyone in general, we should just be open-minded to when people are telling us something, like not be so narrow-minded, and just be open to it, be there for people.
I love it, man. Like, that's honestly one of the main reasons why I wanted to start having these kind of conversations, is to let people know you're not alone. Like, there are all sorts of athletes at every level who feel the way you do, whether it be physically because they're going through the same injury, or because, you know, mentally, emotionally, they're afraid to open up, or they don't want to appear weak, or, you know, there are preconceived notions to allowing people in to how you're really feeling. And it's important to me, like you said, just to talk to somebody. I know if I'm on campus just walking around, I see a kid who's got a cast on or a brace on, or even somebody who's kind of limping, or any visible sign of a physical injury, I'll go up and ask, what happened? How you feeling? And then continue to check in on them. It's the ones that are, I won't say injured, but the ones who are struggling with things that aren't necessarily visible, that you really have to watch out for. And I think that's where having a really strong community of people that you trust, where, hey, go see the trainer, or go see the athletic trainer, you know, talking to coaches, talking to teachers, talking to the mental health professionals on campus, and having relationships with them so they can reach out to you. You can reach out to me and say, hey, I just treated this kid for this injury, and physically they're recovering, but I'm really concerned about them otherwise. You want to check in on them. And I have people do that for me all the time. And vice versa for me, if I see someone where I'm like, this kid's really struggling, I'll go talk to some of my other confidants who understand the situation. Like, hey, do you have a relationship with this kid? Have you dealt with something like this? Who do you suggest that we get them to talk to? And having that network and community is great. And I want student athletes to know, and really anybody, you're not alone in the way you're feeling. There's billions of people in the world. Someone else is dealing with what you're dealing with. And I think you'd be surprised. That was the impetus for creating the podcast. Was I was having conversations with students. And we would finish the conversation, and I was like, damn, I wish I had recorded that, because I have another kid that I'm talking to that's dealing with the exact same thing. Or that's dealing with shades of the same thing. And so for me, I think also having an environment where kids are getting treatment together, they're seeing other kids get treatment, it's like, it opens them up to maybe be a little bit more open and be a little bit more honest about what they're feeling when they see other people who they respect, or who they want to emulate, or this person's like one of the best athletes on campus, and they're in here talking to Josh or John and getting treatment, and I should probably be doing the same. So building up that community and really letting the kids know, like, if you're a student athlete, whatever, just a person in the world, like, you're not alone.
And then it's just like, you could spread positive, like that whole positive energy elsewhere. Like, you could look at your team and say, hey, you know, I'm proud of you. Like, you did so well that game. And that goes a long way. Like, I'll talk to athletes, even in class as a teacher, I'll have mental health checks, and those write whatever they want to write. And it kind of breaks my heart how some of these student athletes, they'll actually be genuine in these, because knowing I'm not going to share with anyone, they're like, I don't like playing my sport. And my parents don't know, but I don't like playing my sport. Or like, what's something that really stood out to you? You know, like, what's a memory you have? And one of them was like when my mom and dad said they were proud of me. And it's like, this is when they were 8, and they're like high school now. So again, spread that positivity. Be nice to people. Really, I tell that people all the time. Be nice to people. Like, it's as cliche as it is, but
letting kids know, like, for me, I try to do it as much as I can, but letting people know, like, hey, man, I care about you, or like, I'm proud of you, or I saw what you did, and not even necessarily for performance. Like, hey, I saw you with another player, like that. I appreciate that. I see you're trying to be a leader, or giving them a helping hand. Like, you can make more of an impact doing this. You should try this or whatever. That community is there, and I think the more open that they are about physical, mental, emotional issues with each other, the more they can be there to support one another. And us too. Like, you don't know what that kid is going through. And I think that's the one thing I really struggle with sometimes is you're trying to push people to perform at their peak. And sometimes it's just not working and you can't figure out why. And then I try to remind myself, it's like, dude, they have a life outside of what you're doing right now. Like, yes, the focus is what we're doing right now, but they're not just a complete student, they're not just a complete athlete, they're a complete person.
Right.
And some aspect of their life might be bothering them or might be affecting them. And in my experience, whether it be on the field, in the classroom, in their social life, in their family life, it's all interconnected. And when one thing is pulling you down, it tends to affect everything else.
Right.
And so having someone just remind you, like, hey, you're doing a good job. Yeah. Like, I see you working. I want you to be better.
Yeah.
And like, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
I think that can go a long way.
Yeah.
So
100%.
you're the man, bro.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you, brother.
Of course.
A huge thank you to my guest, Josh Masmela, to our producer, Malin Blade, and to all the big dogs listening. Tune into our next episode for more Athletes Unleashed. Later, homies.